meeting to order. And we did have a closed session earlier today, and I have nothing to report out of that closed session. And we'll now have a Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. No. Roll call.
Director Diamond?
Here.
Director Hetherington?
Here.
Director Odette?
Here.
Director Rolfe? Here. Director Stevens?
Here.
All here.
Any special orders of business?
I have one. Like many districts around and businesses around the Tahoe, Truckee area, the airport district is very pup friendly. And the dog you see in this picture, Rex, has been coming to the airport for 15 years, which I think other than Mary Hetherington is probably more than any of us. And he just recently died. He belonged to Dave. You can see Dave Hoffman in this photograph here, and I just wanted to acknowledge that because it was a hard hit for a number of our staff who had become super attached to Rex, and Rex was a super sweet pup. So we just want to kind of send well wishes to Dave and to staff and to Rex wherever you are.
Any other special orders? Modification of agenda. The board president reserves the right to modify the agenda to most effectively process the agenda items. We may take them out of order, etc. Does anybody have any modifications they'd like to make to the agenda? Speak your piece reminder. Pay attention. Be aware. And don't choke to death. Don't gossip. Don't accept when others choose to do so. Listen. Focus on others in order to better understand their points of view. Be inclusive. Be agreeable. Show respect. Apologize, be sincere, and repair damaged relationship. Give constructive criticism. Take responsibility. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. Speak your piece. And now time for public comment that anything that's not on the agenda. And I'd like to take the position that we are going to time public comment. The limit is 3 minutes. We haven't really enforced that recently, but we're going to set a timer if there is any public comment and enforce it. Is there any public comment? Well done on that 3 minutes with no comment. Consent agenda. Is there any director who wants to pull any of the consent items?
I'd like to pull number 7.
Number 6?
It's 6 on the left, tab 7, yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? Any public comment? Do I have a motion on the consent items 1 through 5?
I will abstain on the down payment assistance, number 5. But I will make a motion to approve the rest.
I'll second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Aye. Now, did we approve number 4? You didn't vote for it, but we
I
did.
abstained.
Okay.
or recuse myself or whatever.
Okay.
President Stevens, this is just one of those situations where normally under the Political Reform Act, if there's a conflict, the director has to announce it and leave the room. If it's on the consent agenda, they just need to abstain from the item.
And she
So that
just
item-
did.
And she did. So that item was just passed with a 4-0-1 vote.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, let's talk about number 4, the Truckee Donner Recreation Park District Ainsley Partnership Extension Pickleball.
Number 6. You want me to go first?
Go ahead, I have comments as well.
I have 2 things I think we should think about before we vote on this. One is we have a policy, and while we approved it, it was for a specific amount of time, and they didn't meet it. And so I feel like we should not approve an extension and have them come back and ask for it again. That's number 1. And number 2 is our council has advised us that it's a bit of a stretch to have an airport use connected to pickleball. And that's it for me.
If we, under the more current rules, this was done 2 years ago. Under the current rules, we wouldn't even be thinking about this one. It would not be approved. It would have been turned down by our Airport Nexus obligation. We did sign a contract, and they do have some issues. The question is, do we have an obligation to live up to that contract? I would certainly not want to extend it for more than this year. You're suggesting we eliminate it. Any, pardon me?
It's currently expired.
I understand that. Any other comment here before we open to the public?
A question for staff and council. Do we have any other similar situations where we have a precedent for this, or that we might be setting a precedent for in the decision today?
As far as, there's been 3 or 4 in the last 2 years that I've been here that, of award of grants through the agency partnership program that have been extended for more than 1 year, the original term. So from that category, it is something we have done a number of times, either at the staff level, to give them the dollar value at the board level. That has occurred several times that I've seen.
And then just on the precedent question, no. Legally, there's no, any decision on this request doesn't bind a future board on any future similar request.
And then follow-up question is it, do you, given the more refined guardrails that we're operating under now, are you concerned about this raising any flag on that, or based on this happening as a previous commitment, you don't have that concern?
Yeah, I do think because this was an award under the prior policy, and the board at that time determined that there was a public purpose associated with funding this, that if the board wished, you could move forward to extend it. I think it is distinguishable from if we received this request today under the current policy.
Thank you.
And just to be real clear for precedent, this is the first time an extension's been requested under the new PI 311 that would not fit under the current 311. So this is the first time with the new 311.
Public comment.
Oh, there's 2 more.
Pardon me?
Got 2 other board members.
Oh, I didn't realize you, excuse me. Yes, you do.
Yes.
And I would just remind our directors if we can use our microphones as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd just like to remind everybody that we just extended the shade structure for year 4, I think. Was it like 4,
I think so. It was
5
a during the COVID period.
Right, right. But
right.
The
At
difference
least 3
between
years,
that
right.
one and this one is we've never given MAP that money.
The transfer of the money has not occurred.
Right.
Correct. Right.
But the transfer of the money to the pickleball has been,
I believe so.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, just clarify.
in my mind, it did follow that protocol. Our precedence has been to extend, so that's probably where I would fall at this point, is to give them a year to see if they can get it done, 1 year for '24. That's where I'm at now. I'd like to hear from the public, but at this point, I'd like to, that's my thought.
If that's going to be our practice moving forward, then we should modify the policy to say you get an automatic 1-year extension.
That may be a good idea.
Any other questions from the board? Comments? Public comment?
I'm Pete Christian. I'm the recreation superintendent for the Truckee Tahoe Recreation and Park District. Just letting you know that we have a lot of public support for the pickleball project. We're having a little complications with the design phase of the project, but we plan on moving forward, and we feel like we have a lot of support. It's a worthwhile project. And if you have any questions for me, I can answer them.
Can you get it done this year?
I don't know 100% if I can get it done this year. We have complications with the design, with some water going through the area where the courts are proposed, and we have to mitigate that. And that's what we're working on right now.
Can I speak on this?
Sure.
It seems, it would seem unlikely that there would be another extension. And if, under the new policy 311, if you came back, it would seem unlikely that that would be fulfilled. What are the chances that you could get this done this year?
I mean, I know I have a meeting Friday with interested parties to see what we can do to get through this hiccup that we're experiencing right now. I think the goal is to get it done this year, but just with this new complication, that's where we're at.
Do you think you'd know on Friday?
I don't know if I know on Friday. You want to step up?
Steve Randall, citizen, but ex-general manager of Truckee Tahoe Rec and Park District. I applied for this originally when we did this grant. I believe the project will start this year. It might not start till late fall or worst case scenario spring. What the issue is that the property abuts up to a creek. I don't know if you're familiar with the site or not, but it's next to where the bike park is, and there's a dry creek that runs through it. And we will be dealing with Lahontan and the various things. We're looking at options. So I'm on the board for the Truckee Pickleball Club as well, and we're looking at options on moving it over so that we don't have to deal with the environmental issues that associate with the creek. Other questions I might be able to answer? Fred is here. He's the president of the Pickleball Club, should you have any questions. Right now, the Pickleball Club has over 300 members, and so it is something the community is very excited about and looking forward to it. They know that I'm the ex-GM. I get any time that I go play, how's the project going? How's the project going? So it's something that's highly anticipated, and these funds are a portion of the funding for the project. At this point, $1 million has been raised in either dollars or in-kind services. So in terms of funding for the project, we believe there's no problem with getting the project going once we get the permits, the final approvals. And this, the Lahontan thing in the Dry Creek was kind of a thing that just came out that wasn't expected, or we would have been starting in about a month from now.
Okay. So just so I understand this, they have the $50,000. If we vote today to not extend it, they have to return that money
Yes.
fairly soon. If we vote to extend it, they have through the end of 2024 to spend the money, and that if they don't, at that point in time, they would have to either apply for another extension or return the money. Did I get that flow chart right?
That sounded correct.
Perfect, thank you.
My question would be project completion or project starting?
And at this point, with the agreements in place now, that's undesignated.
I'm sorry?
With the current agreement in place now, I believe that's undesignated.
But the money was for construction.
Correct.
If we extend it, you better get constructing.
It is our, well, I'm not Park and Rec anymore. I just represent the pickleball club, but it is the intent to begin fall, worst case scenario, next spring. So that would be within the year timeframe. And we'll, developing plans and things, we have preliminary plans, all of the above. We just need to get past the permit process. Funding's in place at this point.
Thank you, Steve. I hope you're enjoying retirement.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? Well, board discussion.
I was going to make the motion to approve giving them the one-year extension, unless we want to talk about it some more. I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
I've got a litigation concern with our policy and the pickleball and the connection and all that. That's bigger than the fact that they're out of contract, we're out of contract. There is no contract currently. And I love pickleball.
My thought on it is that we, and I understand that that's true, that we did make the agreement, and I understood that they did try to make this happen, and it was difficult to make happen, and you came up against something that was unforeseen. If Josh tells me, because I'm concerned about the litigation as well, if Josh says that we are not concerned about that, I know, Josh, anybody can sue anybody for anything. But I feel like it's worth making the extension through the end of this year.
And if I could offer just one comment, based on the comments I heard from the Park and Rec folks here, Rec and Park folks, is that perhaps you could make the extension through July of '25. If they were to apply for the agency partnership again, be considered, that wouldn't take place until October of next year. The results of that.
Oh, yeah.
What you just said is, realistically, to get under construction, it would have to go through July of '25, not December '24.
I would just say it would avoid the same conversation in January or February 2025.
Do we know of any other partnership grants that have gone out that are subject to asking for an extension?
There have been several that have received extensions.
But I mean, as far as
Kat was
pending.
saying, multiple years.
I'm like pending, like are we about to go out of contract with anyone else that we know of that has not spent their funds?
Yes, we have one with the Achieve Tahoe that wanted to restructure their funds from what was originally approved slightly. Is when I put it in the de minimis category of exact language, $10,000 range.
Mary, if we are going to approve this, would you be willing to make the motion to July or June 30?
Yes, I would. To
And would you
July-
second that?
July 1, July,
Yeah.
well, it depends on weather. Sometimes we
Yeah,
can't even dig.
we are in the
So,
mountains. That's why I always err on the
through
side of midsummer.
Mid-July, end of July of 2025.
If I could offer just one staff perspective as Director of Aviation, trying to channel the pilot community. This item in particular is the single talking point, just for awareness. You probably know this, when it comes to use of taxpayer dollars for community benefit, the pickleball is always the first item that a pilot mentions when it comes to concerns about how we spend tax money. It's pickleball. This is the talking point. I'm not making a political statement. I'm just letting you know that that's what I hear
I wanna-
regularly.
Right. I want to offer,
No opinion.
yeah, I get you. I just want to offer some offline comments that I've heard. You know, I mean, we have the linkage that we developed so that it fell under the categories that we could do this. Pickleball is something that's played by pilots and non-pilots, and some of the funding of that $1 million is coming from some pilot entities. And when we created ACAT, the purpose of that was to bring pilots and non-pilots together. And I think pickleball could provide that venue where, you know, they're going to have overflights right over the park, and people can say, wow, that's really cool, or that really pisses me off. But it opens up a venue for a conversation between two entities that sometimes don't view each other favorably. And if you're playing pickleball, you're having fun, and it changes the discussion point. It's what ACAT was created for. We funded ACAT to the tune of $50,000 a year, and I think there's some value that will come out because I'm not playing pickleball. You're playing. And I've heard everybody rave about how much fun it is. And if it presents a place where people can have this discussion together, I think that's very valuable.
Then,
Yes, I am a pickleball player. I love pickleball. I have a pickleball court at my house. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying I don't like pickleball. It's not valid. It's not worthy. I'm saying it's not an airport use of funds. And we're always talking about taxpayer dollars. So you got a motion and a second on the table.
I just said, did you want me to answer the question that was previously posed on the legal risk on this? Sure. This is an open session, and so, if we wanted to get a full briefing, we did receive a litigation threat alleging, these types of issues, and we would be able to have a closed session to discuss this in more detail. If the board felt you could defer this item for a month, and we could have that discussion. What I would say, right now is that, the board, when the previous board approved this, they determined that it was an airport purpose. That determination is subject to deference by the courts. And this extension would be subject to that, that same sort of deference. The other thing I would note is that if we did receive a legal challenge, our funding agreements require the funding recipient to indemnify us from that challenge. So if we were challenged on that, we would be tendering that to the Rec and Park District.
Would it be the Rec and
Yikes.
Park District, or would it be the pickleball?
The recipient of the funds, whoever signed the contract.
Okay.
Well,
In a way that's not so legal.
Yeah, so if we get sued on these things, we will defend ourselves, but we also will look to the person who received the funds to stand behind that, right? One of the conditions when we provide that funds is a recognition that if the funding award is challenged, that they would be responsible for ponying up on that.
any other comments before we vote? I'd like to do this on a roll call.
Director Diamond,
Yes.
Director Odette,
No.
Director Rolfe,
Yes.
Director Hetherington,
Yes.
Director Stevens.
No.
Motion passed.
All right, let's go on to the next item. Bioenergy feasibility report.
So we have a guest presentation today on from Mr. Featherman here is going to be doing online with Zoom. You have the material in your board package, but this is an update of the current status of a bioenergy study that we have jointly moved forward with both the town of Truckee, ourselves, and the fire district, looking for solutions to dealing with the forest waste and residue coming out of our defensible space and forest management practices in this region. With that introduction, David, if you don't mind introducing yourself and going through your presentation.
Sure, thank you, Rob. David Featherman, Wildefort Consulting. For those of you who were here 18 months or so ago, I briefed this body to talk about the results of our preliminary scoping study. So what I'll present tonight is the results of the 18 months of work that happened after that. Rob, do you have a sense of how much time I should try to limit the formal presentation to?
I think 20 minutes would be great, if that's possible.
Okay, so given that, I've got about a 45-minute presentation, so I'm going to have to fly through these slides, but I'm happy to stick around and take as many questions as folks have, so no worries there. And thanks, Emily, for flipping slides. Let's go ahead. The next slide is just the agenda. We can skip that and just dive right in. So as Rob said, the driver of this, this project has been to come up with better ways to utilize the material that's being generated through a variety of activities by the town of Truckee, by the residents of Truckee, by organizations like the Airport District and the Fire District. So coming out of the scoping study, you may remember we landed on 2 different pathways to take a deeper dive into during the feasibility phase. The first was a biomass power pathway, so using this biomass, the residual biomass to generate electricity. The second was called a combined heat and biochar technology option, which does what it says. Along the way, during the course of the feasibility study, we actually added a third pathway, which is really an offshoot of the biomass power pathway, which is an air curtain burner system that's connected to an EV charging station and a battery bank. We'll talk about that. But so there were really ended up being 3 pathways that we looked at as part of the feasibility study. In addition, because one of the pathways produces a product called biochar, we did a sort of a supplemental market study of the biochar material and carbon credit markets, and we'll talk about that. So that was sort of the scope of the analysis. Next slide, please. Before we dug into the technologies, we spent quite a bit of time, understanding that both the quantity of feedstock that we expect to come from these various disposal pathways, as well as the quality of that material and what the best use for that material might be. Again, I'm going to go really quickly here. There's a full-blown feasibility report that is in the hands of the town of Truckee that will be made publicly available prior to my giving the similar presentation to the town council next month. And so all the details that are in these slides are in even greater detail in the report. But suffice to say, we spent quite a bit of time looking at the feedstock. We determined that there's approximately 13,000 bone-dry tons of feedstock or fuel available for a bioenergy project from all the partners combined. About half of that material is currently not recovered. It's left on site to decay, and that causes greenhouse gas emissions and other problems. A little less than half of it is currently being delivered to ERL, where it's processed. And of course, there's a tipping fee associated with that. We looked pretty in-depth into the cost associated with disposing of all the green waste in what we call the business as usual pathway. It works out to about $98, almost $100 a bone-dry ton to dispose of this material. So again, that's a driver for can we do something more productive with the material. Next slide. This is just, probably hard to read, but this is just a summary of the analysis we did on feedstock and which of the 4 partners is contributing. The fire district is by far contributing the most material. They're estimated to have about 2/3 of the total. The town of Truckee is about 28%, and then you can see at the bottom, the airport district and the PUD combined are really only 5 or 6%. So really became strongly focused on the material, especially coming out of the fire district, because that's the highest quality material that we've had. So next slide, please. And then for those of you who were here in 2022, when we talked following the scoping study, at that point, we were really focused on a cluster of buildings that is there at the on and adjacent to the airport property. There was a cluster of public buildings that included the town hall, fire station, police station, and some of the airport properties. And that was the target of, can we develop a microgrid of some kind? What kind of utility offsets were available? The more we looked into that site, the more we realized the challenges were probably, maybe too much to overcome. You're no doubt familiar with a separate study that was commissioned that looked at siting issues associated with the parcels that we were looking at there at the south side of the airport. Long story short, we decided to pivot and move to focusing on a different site, which is the Public Service Center, where the Truckee Public Works Department and Animal Services building's located. That facility is being redeveloped, further developed. There's going to be a EV bus charging station and storage facility that's going in. And so we looked at serving loads, both current and future anticipated loads, through some sort of heating or electric or combination thereof through a bioenergy system. So everything you'll see from this point forward is focused on that Public Service Center site. Next slide, please. This is just an overview of the site. You're probably well familiar with it, but it does have great access there. It's just south of I-80, Highway 267, right off of Truckee Way. So there's approximately 6 or 7 acres available to the east side of that campus, and as I say, good access for potentially moving fuel in to fuel the system. So next slide, we can probably just say there's about $250,000 of current utility usage there in terms of the annual spend. And we dug into unit costs and demand and things like that. It's all in the report, but pretty significant amount of utility purchases that could potentially be offset by the system. So next slide. So I won't get into too much depth here because it would take too long, but again, the 3 options that we looked at, we called them option 1A and 1B. Those were the power-led options. And again, the first one is a combined heat and power system. I'll show you some photos and describe that in just a second. Option 1B is the air curtain burner system that I mentioned earlier, which is just a power system. And then option 2, the combined heat and biochar, which is heating and production of this co-product biochar. The first 2 options, 1A and 1B, could both support EV charging and both potentially support a microgrid. So they can be sort of on grid or off grid. The combined heat and biochar system would have a small district heating loop that would provide essentially hot water to replace gas-fired heaters on the PSC campus. Want to just note that none of the options that we're looking at envision a large-scale processing facility or operation for the biomass material. So this would just be a power generation or a heat generation system. The footprint of these facilities and at this scale would be something on the order of 5,000 square feet or something with ancillary area around that. But this is not envisioned to be a large wood processing facility. That would have to happen somewhere else. Next slide, please. So the first option is a boiler option. And for those of you who are familiar with the system that's being implemented at North Star, I was part of the team that developed that project early on. And so this option actually mirrors that pretty closely. This would be 2 1-megawatt boilers that make hot water, pump it through what's called an organic Rankine cycle generator to make electricity. So there'd be these two boiler ORC systems running in parallel. And it would consume about 4,200 bone dry tons a year of fuel as we sized it. So that's about a third of the material, if you remember the 13,000 that I mentioned earlier. But that would allow us to focus on the high quality material, which is much better for a boiler system like this. And so you'll see each of these 3 options have some really distinct advantages and some unique challenges. And so I'll try to highlight those. And again, much more in-depth discussion on that in the report. But the boiler option is the most robust technology. It also allows the town to meet its SB 1383 procurement requirements, if you're familiar with that, organics recycling requirement from the state. Purchasing electricity from this system would allow the town to meet that target. Challenges for a system like this are the interconnection to the grid. And because the PUD was a partner in the project, we feel like, and they've indicated that there's no real significant technical challenges to connecting to the grid. There would just be some costs and some time associated with that. So, and then a net metering agreement would be required in order to, capture the value of the electricity. So Next slide shows just a high level, or it's just sort of a representative picture of what a boiler like this might look like. On the right, you see the boiler. That's probably an 8 or 9 foot tall piece of equipment, so not massive. To the left of that right-hand image, there's a large storage tank where you keep hot water. And then that hot water first would go to the cube that you see on the left, which is the ORC generator. It makes electricity through heat exchange, basically. And then from there, that hot water could continue on to the campus and provide some district heating. Next slide. The second power-led option is this air curtain burner option, which is attached to a 100 kilowatt ORC generator, same technology to make the electricity using heat. In this case, we would just be essentially building an EV charging station with a battery bank. So you could run the air curtain burner during the day, consume, in this case, the full 13,000 bone dry tons of wood each year, charge a battery bank during the day while you're operating the system, bring the EV buses in, park them at night, do overnight charging, ready to go in the morning. That's kind of the design scenario for this option 1B. One of the challenges here is that it does require 2 full-time operators, whereas the boiler plant that I described in option 1A is mostly self-sufficient. You need a couple hours, maybe of an operator checking on things. This is a much more labor-intensive option. The key advantage is that all the material that's currently sent to ERL could theoretically be brought to an air curtain burner system like this and just dropped in. And so you're avoiding $500,000, up to $500,000 a year of tipping fees combined from the partners. It's a modular design. It's very low impact. You basically pour a slab. This modular equipment shows up. You can place it where you want to place it. You can move it if you need to. I have a picture on the next slide. The challenge is high labor costs, and you can't operate this thing in winds in excess of 20 miles an hour. So we looked at that in the report, talked about whether that's feasible, and it turns out it should be on a normal weather year. And this is what the system looks like. Again, just some modules that can be shipped and dropped on the site, moved around as needed. Next slide, the last option is the combined heat and biochar option. This is, rather than a boiler, rather than combusting the wood, this is a process called pyrolysis, where essentially you're making charcoal. You're heating the wood up in the absence of oxygen, and that leads to the production of this co-product biochar, which in the case of the system that we looked at, about 25% of what goes in as feedstock comes out as biochar. And in the process of making the biochar, you have heat that you can, again, use to do heating buildings or hydronic heating of slabs or that sort of thing. This system would use about 3,300 bone dry tons a year of feedstock. So this is the smallest throughput system, partly because this system requires the most high quality fuel to successfully operate. It just has the tightest fuel spec. So using that much material in, you get about 830 tons of biochar out, which I'll talk about later, but you can sell that material and you can sell carbon credits associated with producing that material. The advantage of this system is this is the only option where you're actually sequestering carbon. The other options, you're offsetting other types of emissions, but you're not actually sequestering carbon. Because of that, because you can sell that material and those credits, this is the highest revenue system of the 3 that we looked at. But as I said, the tight fuel spec and then the fact that these markets for biochar are still evolving and the carbon credit market is fairly new. It's only really been active for the last 3 years or so, is somewhat of a challenge that the other 2 systems don't face. So next slide. There's a photo here of a representative. This is kind of the scale we're talking about for this option 2. A little bit, it's basically comparable to option 1A. This is an open air version of this. You could certainly put this into a small boiler plant like option 1A. So they're comparable in that sense. Next slide. I'm going to really quickly go through this. Basically, the story is we worked with the Northern Sierra Air Quality Management District, had meetings and several follow-ups with them. They're very much supportive of any of these options as an alternative to open pile burning. And so the regulators are on board. They've assured us they'd work collaboratively to permit any of these systems. There are significant criteria pollutant emission reductions as a result of using any of these systems, but particularly option 1A, the boiler, and option 2, the pyrolysis plant. And then there's significant greenhouse gas reductions, which we get into in the next slide, from any of these systems. So you can go ahead and flip to the next chart. This is a summary, won't go into detail, of the greenhouse gas emission reductions as a result of pursuing these three pathways. The bottom line is, so there's an annual total, and then there's a 25-year, we assume a 25-year design life for these systems. So you can see we're talking about somewhere in the 100 to 200,000 metric tons of greenhouse gas emission reductions as a result of these systems. The largest contributor to those reductions actually is getting material off the forest floor, not letting it decay in place and not letting it create methane. So that sort of overwhelms all the other savings from avoided natural gas or avoided hauling chips to a cogen plant, all those sorts of things. So just important to note that. Next slide, please. In terms of putting this in some context, in the report we show, just as a point of comparison, how much GHG emissions are there from all the vehicles that are registered in town of Truckee? Turns out there's approximately 66,000 metric tons a year emitted from all the passenger vehicles in Truckee. So as I said, over a 25-year period, you would be able to offset, a couple of multiples of this, 2 or 3 times an annual use or an annual emission from all the cars in Truckee. So it is a meaningful, it would be a meaningful reduction. Next slide, please. This is just a high-level estimate of the criteria pollutants that we would expect from these types of systems. The boiler plant and the pyrolysis plant are almost across the board well within the lowest threshold that the Air Quality Management District looks at in terms of needing mitigations for the system. The air curtain burner is a bit higher, but again, they've assured us that system, they would view that as an improvement over open burning and other things. So next slide. So lastly, the financial analysis. There's a few different components here. We looked at the annual operating costs for these three systems. We looked at the capital costs to implement the systems. And then we did this 25-year pro forma financial analysis to kind of see where, whether or not these projects pencil, essentially. And then in addition, we did a sensitivity analysis to look at, we got really what we think are good estimates for the cost of the fuel to put into the systems, most likely at this point to be procured from ERL, but there are other options on the table, public-private partnerships for developing feedstock, sorting yards, and that sort of thing. But for now, we're assuming ERL for option 1A and option 2 for the fuel source. And then we looked at sensitivity around if natural gas prices go up or down, or electricity prices go up or down, how does that change the results of the model? So the next slide is a summary of the operating costs. And I guess the takeaway here would be that option 1A is essentially a break even. You're not going to make a lot of money, but you're not going to, the project does pencil, but just barely. And we'll look more at that when we do the pro forma. Option 1B, because of the high labor cost that I talked about earlier, it has the highest annual operating costs. However, if you can offset some or all of this $500,000 in tipping fees at ERL, this could actually have a net community benefit that's pretty significant. Actually, the highest of the three, that bottom row in blue. And then option 2, the pyrolysis system, is somewhere in between. It's got a pretty moderate operating cost of under $100,000 a year, and this potential high upside of selling biochar and carbon credits that could, be in the $400,000 range in terms of annual revenue. So that one comes out positive as well. Next slide is, if you could back up just one, there you go. The next slide is just a high-level summary of the capital cost. There's some more detailed estimates in the report, but essentially for option 1A, the boiler plant, you're looking at about an $8 million project without considering the contingency line, but just the estimated direct and indirect cost, about $8 million for that. About 2.7 for the air curtain burner. It's much cheaper than the other two, as you might expect. And then option 2, the pyrolysis system, is about a $6.3 million project. And between this slide and the previous slide, you can see that the option with the highest capex has the lowest opex, and vice versa. So it's definitely a trade-off between a higher upfront investment versus a higher annual operating costs. So next slide, please. This is the summary of the entire financial analysis, which shows over 25 years, all three of the systems would pay back, but you can see there in option 1A, it just sort of barely makes it. It's got an estimated payback of 24 years. Option 1B's much more cost effective in that sense. It can pay for itself in about 6 years. And then option 2, again, comes in between those two. You can see we've got an annualized ROI if those numbers are meaningful. But they're all positive, which is a good thing. And then next slide is the sensitivity analysis, just to say again that I won't go into that, but in the report, you'll see that we change numbers, we change inputs to the models and see how it changes the output. The takeaways were that option 1A and 1B are really dependent on the cost of the fuel. Option 1A, we're assuming $10 a bone dry ton to buy chips from ERL. Option 1B, we're assuming that it's essentially a zero cost fuel. If those numbers change, those options become less attractive if those numbers go up. On the plus side, option 1B doesn't care what the utility offsets are. It doesn't matter what gas or electric prices do, because it's the financial viability of that is almost entirely based on avoiding those tipping fees at ERL. Option 2 actually does have flexibility to absorb some increases in fuel prices or some changes in utility rates, and so that's something to consider. Next slide. Okay, last piece is the biochar markets. Again, this only applies to option 2, but this 830 tons a year of high quality biochar could be sold as a soil amendment. There's all kinds of industrial uses for this material coming onto market. We think that those sales combined could be in the neighborhood of $400,000 a year at current market rates. It's important to note that these are independent revenue streams. In other words, you can sell the biochar to one party, you can sell the carbon credits separately. You can bundle them together, but you don't necessarily need to do that. The other interesting takeaway is that the market for the material itself is essentially a regional market. You don't want to be spending a lot of money shipping it cross country. But the carbon market is global. So there are these basically online platforms. It's a stock market in a sense, and you can trade carbon or you can sell carbon credits to whomever, whenever, wherever. So those are completely independent. Next slide. I actually probably not going to talk about this, but this is just to say that there are an emerging number of uses for the material other than as an agricultural amendment. We go into that pretty detailed in the report. So next slide. What we found in Truckee, in looking in the region, what's the demand for this material? Essentially, currently there's an excess of material. There's sort of an excess of supply versus demand. And so we used a pretty low number in terms of a unit sale price for the material in the financial models, but we talk in the report about, we didn't call it a sensitivity analysis, but we looked at, if the price of carbon credits, goes higher than they currently are, at what point can you basically give this material away, not have to sell it, and not in order for the project to pencil. So there's a discussion of that in the report. But the main takeaway is that there's currently not a strong demand for this material in the Truckee region. The best avenue for getting offtake of the material is to either have a direct relationship with someone that's going to be a repeat buyer of the material, and we did identify a couple of potential folks in the Truckee region who were interested, or there are brokers that will just take this material off your hands in the same way that they would broker other agricultural commodities. And so those are the two pathways for the material. Next slide. And lastly, the carbon market piece. There's a lot of material in the report about this, and it's kind of its own complicated topic, so I won't dive too deeply, but just know, I guess, for every ton of biochar that you're making, you're sequestering about 2.5 tons of carbon dioxide, and so that becomes the basis for what you're selling on these voluntary markets. And to put this in perspective, about 5.3 million metric tons of carbon dioxide removal credits have been sold on these voluntary markets to date, and most of that has happened, honestly, in the last 3 or 4 years. And that market represents currently $2.1 billion in cumulative sales since 2019. So this market is, I think, reached a tipping point, and I think really this is probably where the main value of option 2 lies, more than the material, and probably more than the heat you're making. So I put the note here at the bottom that the value of these credits serves as a hedge in a sense against the volatility in the material markets potentially. So we talk a lot more about that in the report. I think this is just a snapshot of the sales of carbon dioxide removal credits over the last 3 years from just the 3 largest producers in the United States. So Again, we're talking about 830 tons of biochar, so 2,000 tons of carbon dioxide, which would be significant. But there are folks as close as in Oregon that are selling 5 times that or a couple times that a year at this point. So this is a viable market. This is happening. Puro.earth is probably the most advanced market for selling carbon dioxide removal credits based on biochar, and so that's the market we focused on in the report. All right, so the summary here is, next slide, is we for the last 18 months we've really taken a triple bottom line view of this effort. We're interested, as all the partners were interested in, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, reducing wildfire risk, but also of course care about the financial impacts of the project. So economic, environmental, social was the lenses that we looked through. In terms of economics, as I said, all the projects, the 3 options would be a positive return on investment. There's the trade-off between a lower CapEx and a higher OpEx. And then there's some uncertainty around, or sensitivity around, what the ultimate price of the wood fuel would be and how that impacts your bottom line. On the environmental side, the criteria pollutants are, depending on the pollutant you're talking about, would be reduced somewhere between 60 and 99% relative to open pile burning in the woods. That's the baseline there, which is a small percentage of the material, but that's the baseline. And then on the GHG side, as I said, we're talking about in excess of potentially 100,000 metric tons over 25 years. So that's a significant savings. And then lastly, the project in North Star, which again, I was a part of that team for a couple of years when they were in the early stages of development. The vision there has been, and I think all the partners share this vision, of sort of taking these incremental steps to developing a circular bioeconomy around this material. Stop thinking about it as a waste and a nuisance and a fire risk, and think about it as a valuable benefit to the community if you can utilize it properly. So, from a social standpoint, I think a project like this, a community scale project that could fit into a 2 or 3 acre parcel, could be another incremental step in developing that circular bioeconomy. So that's where we ended up. I mean, we had a lot of meetings to talk about, is one of these pathways the slam dunk, the most obvious path to choose? And the answer really was, there isn't a slam dunk. They all have their pluses and minuses. One of the things we didn't have a chance to look at was, can we take the best elements of all these and do a hybrid, maybe a combined heat and biochar, but add a power generation component to increase revenue, maybe increase resiliency by having an EV charging station, that sort of thing. So it's possible that, if one of the pathways isn't quite there, but is perceived to have significant benefit, there's some value engineering that could potentially improve, what the bottom line looks like. There are some of the options had a 30% investment tax credit that's available if you're combined heat and power. So that applied to option 1A, but it didn't apply to option 2. And so there's, again, if you had a hybrid system, you could probably take advantage of some of these other tax credits, things like that. So from my perspective, having done numerous projects now over the last 10 years, I think that there is really a compelling opportunity here. I think, having worked on the North Star project and having worked on a smaller project in Quincy, and knowing what the numbers look like going into those projects, I think the outcome here is every bit as good, if not better, than those projects. And so it really just becomes a matter of, is there a champion for the project? Do we have the right site for the project? And do people want to put resources behind moving it forward? But I definitely think any of these projects could be potentially viable. And that's it. Happy to take as many questions as we have, and my contact information is there on the last slide. So if folks have things that they think of later, you want to reach out, please do that.
So at this point, we're not obviously asking the board for any action, but just provide you an update on this project and the study. Our partners are being briefed over the next month in their respective public board meetings. As those take place, we plan on getting back together with our consultant, Mr. Featherman, to discuss what the next steps might be, what the recommendations might be after we get feedback from our public settings.
If I could just add to that, I know, having spoken to the folks at the town, that they're actually very, very curious about what the feedback is from you all as well. So to the extent that I can take something back from some impressions back from this meeting, that'd be helpful too.
Hi, David. This is David Diamond. I've got just two questions for you. One is that on that early slide when we looked at the contribution of feedstock, and it showed the airport and the PUD, Truckee Tahoe PUD, contributing very little. Have we talked to North Tahoe Fire or anyone at the lake who might be able to contribute more meaningfully to this, and then maybe increase the ROI somewhat?
We haven't spoken to anybody. Well, I'm not familiar with that entity, so I guess the answer would be for the first part of your question, no. That material that you're seeing there for the airport and the PUD was just based on operations over the last several years. I think there was a removal effort for the airport where it was kind of, you got a bunch of material out in a pretty short amount of time, but the message was that it wasn't anticipated that would be a steady state. So that removal, those removal projects weren't really counted. So we were just looking at material for the airport that was sort of this routine maintenance, and it was, as you say, pretty low volumes. In terms of the ROI question, because the systems as they're currently sized, I mean, yeah, it's an open question, I guess. It's possible if you enlarge the size of the system because you had more feedstock, you could improve the ROI. But for the two options, the boiler and the pyrolysis option, we're actually using much less than the total material that we've already identified. So it's not that we're up against the limit on the feedstock. Unless we increase the size of the system, then of course we would need more material.
Okay, and then my second question is actually somewhat related to the numbers you showed with regard to the potential revenue generated. I'm just wondering about, like, when we talk about $400,000, $400,000 is not no money, but then when you think about tilting up a mechanism to actually sell and manage that, it seems like we might end up maybe breaking even pretty quickly on even something like that. Or if you are involving a broker, the brokerage fees and all that could bring that down. So I just would be interested generally if there's anything that we could do to make the back end numbers look better without discounting the environmental impacts, which I think are substantial. But if our focus is maybe too narrow in Truckee and it could be expanded beyond that to help improve those numbers, I don't know how everybody else would feel, but I'd love to see that that kind of an approach. That's it for me. Thanks.
Any other questions?
I just want to note that I'd like to see the North Star facility, what it ends up being and doing. I mean, is that under construction now? What is the plan on that?
Yeah, the plan, so I'm not, was that question directed to me? Sorry.
Yeah. Do you
Okay.
know, if you know?
Yeah, I didn't know if there was somebody in the room from North Star there.
Mary.
There is, and maybe we can ask Mr. Stoudemire to come and make just a brief comment on that. That way David won't go out on the limb here.
You bet. Good evening, Mike Stoudemire, GM North Star CSD. We've been at this for quite some time. We worked with David starting, I think, 2019 and developed a feasibility study and initial scoping study, feasibility study, distilled it into a project, and have been pursuing that ever since. And it's a 2 megawatt district heating system only. We're not looking at doing any power or biochar or anything like that. We're merely trying to offset the heating load in the North Star Village and surrounding rec centers with that are currently served by natural gas with this wood energy. And so right now, we're about to wrap up our fundraising. We're approaching $5 million in grant funding for about a $9 million capital outlay. And we are through the CEQA process. We are through the Placer County conditional or land planning process with a conditional use permit. We're within 2 weeks of getting our air quality permit from the Placer County Air Pollution Control District. That's the district we're in. And we're in the process of formalizing contracts with 3 different groups of what we call connected entities that we'll be selling the energy to in the village. Our plan is to wrap up the contracting, the permitting, the fundraising, and present to our board in April our pro forma to order the boiler system as well as the building package that the facility will go in and go to construction this spring. So that's if all these things come together. It's a short construction season window, and so if we get delayed, we might, on any of these items, we might be pushed back a year, but our plan is to get to construction this spring, this season, have it shelled in by winter time and making heat, and probably the second quarter of 25. And I did want to make just a comment to you guys as well that I thank you guys for partnering with the other entities in the region to tackle this problem of what to do with this woody biomass that we all know needs to come out of our forests. And right now, if you didn't know, it's if the facility's taking it in Rio Bravo, which is about 100 miles away in Lincoln, that's where it goes, but only if they're paying $35 a bone-dry ton. That same material could come to North Star at our facility. They break even at 10. If that facility isn't running, it's going to Lockwood to rot in landfills. So at cost, and right now we're paying more in garbage to get rid of this material. So another layer of social benefit is to think about taking this material that our region's generating and putting it to work as opposed to, like I said, treating it as waste. Alex Hoft did a phenomenal job on an article with Moonshine Inc. I think it was June of last year or something like that. And so I encourage you to take a look at that. She did a really deep dive into looking at all the different issues surrounding this topic. So, but there is no silver bullet. All these things have pros and cons, and you got to find what. Sorry, they're not. Oh, sorry. Yeah. It was really good. Sorry, you guys missed that. But in any event, thank you for taking this on. And we are a resource as well, since we're a couple of years down the road with our project, and we hope to have it in place with a nice interpretive piece so people can come and look at this and not have to wonder what these things actually look, smell, and sound like. So we're a resource for you, as well as David and the others that are working on this problem. That answer your question?
Yeah, I appreciate that, because, it's that'll be a proven technology to some extent for this to build off of, and then I see Cabin Creek biomass is coming alive again as well, so.
Yeah, and just, put it in perspective, Europe has been at these for a long, long time. Back east in New England, we went and visited plants that had been operating for in excess of a decade with really low technology in terms of emission control, no issues on school sites, and one was strapped to a hospital. And so, these things have been in play in our, country, just not in our neck of the woods. The closest one is in Quincy, and it's really just a pilot. So we can do it here. Any other questions while I'm here?
Thank you, Mike.
You bet, Rick.
Nice to see you. Any other questions, comments? Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much.
All right. Any other public comment on this item? Thank you. We'll move on then to agenda item 8, agency-supported independent journalism, written up by Director David Diamond. You're not mic'd yet. Okay.
Okay, so when I first thought about this, it was because we, as agencies, we make a lot of commitments to transparency, and it's important that people are involved with the public process, such as an open meeting like this. But I find, and this is from somebody who from communication was kind of my business for a few decades, it's very difficult for someone in the general public to fully understand what's happening in government. We have multiple layers of government. If you live in this region, you're supposed to pay attention to what Truckee is doing and what Tahoe City PUD is doing at the North Shore, and what the counties are doing, and what the state of California is doing, and what the federal government is doing. And before you know it, you don't really have a good grasp on anything that you haven't been educated about on social media or through a news medium. So what I was hoping for was someone who, or maybe it's more than one person, who was an independent professional journalist with experience in government affairs, who could track partner districts, partner meaning districts that are participating in the cost of this, to keep the public informed of what the district is doing, the outcome of votes on the district, on rolling agendas for people to understand in 5 or 6 months what will be coming down there, and then to hold the districts accountable and responsible for the decisions that have been made. So to follow up in 6 or 9 months and say, hey, you decided to do X, Y, or Z, what are you doing on that? I think it's a lift that might be too much for a staff journalist who has to do multiple beats, because this sounds pretty full-time, if not more than full-time for me on doing this. So I talked to some electeds on some other boards at North Tahoe PUD, at Truckee Fire, at Tahoe City PUD, and the town of Truckee. And the interest level was between interesting, I need to learn more, to I like the idea. And so I contacted Mayumi who's the publisher of Moonshine Inc., to see if this would be a viable concern, if this would be something that could be managed by one of the local media outlets. And she, I presumably, will speak on that tonight. So that was basically the gist of it. We increased transparency not by making a lot of information available, but by distilling that information into a way that is consumable and understandable by people who do not have the inside track on what's going on with all of our districts. So that was the goal.
Thank you, David. Any questions on the board? Mayumi, come talk to us. Okay. Well staffed.
I'm her muscle. And I have my laptop because I am a print journalist, not a broadcast journalist, and shy away from the camera. I'm Alex Hoft. I have been a news reporter for Moonshine Inc. for coming up on 5 years now, and I have spoken to, hassled, chatted with many people in this room. And I wanted to frame Moonshine Inc.'s thoughts on this. Mayumi will come, she'll be my clutch person. As a reminder, which we are very proud of this fact, but Moonshine Inc. is the region's only independent news source. And we are quite thankful that the district is considering looking at this important aspect of democracy, as well as the interest to work alongside the numerous other regional special districts, jurisdictions, organizations, etc. As the district explores the hiring of an independent journalist, it's important to understand how vital such a watchdog role is to democracy. I wanted to share 2 examples that are provided by the nonpartisan group Democracy Fund. The first is that in 2016, the Pew Research Center reported that consuming local journalism is associated with consistent voting in local elections and a strong connection to the community. Second example is that local media establishes a trusted, shared public understanding of local issues, counteracting distrust of national media. That last one in particular is a friendly reminder that social media is not necessarily always the most viable or accurate news source. I wanted to give an idea of what impactful local journalism has looked like out of Moonshine Inc. For me specifically, just because I've had my hands in these stories. These are a couple of a handful of local issues I've reported on during my time with Moonshine, most pretty recently. One story was about the sediment runoff, water quality degradation, and invasive species affecting Donner Lake, a collapsing fire insurance market, the airport district's property exchange with TTSA, poor working conditions for J1 workers, an extremely divisive Incline Village General Improvement District Board of Trustees and community, and hospital staff burnout and frustration with how the health system is handling it. I heard from numerous residents that these stories were educational, and the understanding was indeed expanded, and thus, as the description notes, transparency was increased, leading to a better informed constituency. Now for the real muscle.
Tell us what you want to hear too. I have some notes. Just say what I want to say?
Say what you want to say.
All right. Well, for those that don't know, I'm Mayumi Peacock, publisher of Moonshine Inc. and founder. Been doing it for over 20 years, and I believe in journalism even more today than when I started the paper. It has a role in a community and in our nation of helping us understand ourselves, helping us celebrate ourselves, and helping us better ourselves. And without it, democracy really does falter. I read recently and wrote recently in Moonshine that there are people that say they're actually synonymous, democracy, journalism. One falters, the other falters. So I just wanted to make some comments on the staff report with this rough outline of this proposal. And if you have any other questions for me, I am more than happy to address them. First of all, encouraging public engagement in the public process is awesome. Anything that does more to encourage that is excellent in my view. So I think that as a board directive is very important. I'm curious about the idea of a new position. It seems like maybe you would encourage things that are already in place, people that are already in place. For the district, I wonder if that would look like grants or perhaps extending your community partnership program to journalism, identifying it as something that should be included in that program. As important as the information, I think getting it out there is also important. So I think engaging people on platforms that already exist and that people engage with meaningfully is important. Otherwise, it's near impossible to capture an audience. You're looking at short attention spans across the U.S. and especially in our community where people are, stretched to the absolute minimum, or maximum, I should say. The position, as described, seemed to have like an agenda watch role, which I think is important. But with as many agencies as we have, that could get rather cumbersome. And I was reflecting back on the early days of Moonshine when we tried to do minutes of all the public agencies in our coverage area, and that was absolutely impossible to do, really. And I think even more today, people wouldn't pay attention. So I think if you were to go that route, it would have to be clearly defined what items, what topics would be followed and shared with the community. Or maybe let journalists do their jobs and, figure out what finger on the pulse of the community is important. With regard to the idea that this position could be 100% remote, I don't think that you have community journalism when people are remote. I think it's important for people to be a part of their community if they're going to be reporting on it. And then journalism is known as the fourth estate, and we all know that. It exists outside of the government, but it is part of a well-functioning government. So I think keeping that clear delineation between the reporter and the reported on is very important. And so overall, I would say that any effort to engage the public, as I said before, via keeping them informed is one to be sought. That's it.
Thank you. Questions?
I have a question. I'm not sure, are you in support of this or not in support of this?
I say yes.
I mean, it's an intriguing idea. I always think, having worked on EIRs, you may have to make your comment at a draft EIR. People don't get excited till it's the final EIR, and it's too late. So that's an example of the value of this. And I also see it, I also see a value in terms of a regional aspect, because we're kind of two communities in a way, and if I knew more of what was going on at the lake, that makes me feel more tied in with the lake side, just as those folks over there find out what's here, because we really are all connected. We should be our own county. So, but in terms of coming out once a month, that's not good enough. This information would have to be developed more frequently, and in terms of remote or not, it's somebody who would, like the people who do all the video, they're probably more hip to what's going on at all of these meetings, trying to synthesize that. I mean, this person who, if they could just watch almost not all the districts, and those who aren't should be going to video. This could be an impetus to them to go to video, but for me, it's like a big stretch to see how to take this whole world of information and cull it down to something that is palatable. And like you said, can you not speak legal, right? I mean, and the nuance of a lot of the decisions we all face. I mean, it's an exciting idea. I think it needs to be fleshed out more. And where is it an online venue that then gets blasted out to people daily, weekly? I don't know. It's an intriguing idea. I think there's a lot of value, because when people are finding out about things, it's often like it's a done deal.
You done?
I think so. I might have more.
You can come back. I have concerns about the optics of hiring a journalist to be unbiased. And I'm thinking about like some of the publications I read, like Consumer Reports and Nutrition Action, that take no advertising dollars because they never want to be accused of being bought by an industry.
Yeah.
Right? It's like when all the non-fat stuff, and that was all bogus. That was the sugar industry that paid for that. So I think just at its core, it feels to me like paying someone. It's like, why wouldn't we pay a marketer? I mean, if we want to tell our story, then we could do that. But and then the question is up here too: what form of oversight would be provided to make sure the journalist functions without bias? What if we're fighting with the town over something? What if we've got some issue that we can't really resolve? How does that get presented in an unbiased way? So I have some concerns.
Yeah, just to address those, having been in marketing for 2 decades, this is extremely different than marketing. Marketing is, hey, we're doing this and we want you to know about this. This would be when something comes along, like for example, like tonight, we're having a discussion about this. And that this journalist would be watching this and deciding, if we decide to move forward, this might be something worth writing up to let the community know. The airport board discussed the concept of having of course it's a little recursive at that point because they're already there, but or the biomass thing. How many people in the general public would have any idea why we sat through that presentation on biomass? Mm-hmm. Would they know the history? Would they know why the town was involved? Would they know why North Tahoe Fire was not involved? Or would all of these things that are far beyond the scope of just like a marketing announcement or a social media post, because you're part of it is that you are keeping this chain, this of content together. So you have backward references to articles that were done before, or you have the accountability in the future that 3 months, the airport board says it's going to do something in May, and then this journalist contacts Rob in May and says, how's that thing coming along? Because I'm going to update the public on what was going on. That's the independent nature of it. And when you have an inside marketing team, they are absolutely biased. That is their job. And so it's very difficult, first of all, to always trust that. And secondarily, if we have something like we have with the mass discussion, we have 4 agencies involved. Where's the coordination between the 4 agencies to tell that story? And I just don't feel that our districts have that expertise on staff. They don't have, that's beyond the scope of one agency for us to have a journalist on hand who would contact the town and coordinate something. So that to me was where that would go to. And the optics thing, which is absolutely significant, Mayumi will probably back me up on this. Whether you characterize it as the sad state of journalism today, most journalism outlets are owned by some corporation. And part of the essence of being a true professional journalist is to be able to put those guardrails up, to keep that independence in what you're saying. So there will always be that, well, this newspaper is owned by Rupert Murdoch, so of course it's going to be biased a certain way. There will always have something like that. But my hope would be that if the public saw there were 5 or 8 or however many districts there were, and to me it feels a little scalable, because as we get more people involved, we could add more people, on the different beats. But to see that all of these agencies are involved and a reputable news organization is involved, and that collectively, if they all stamp it and say, in our opinion, this is unbiased, independent journalism, that maybe it's believable.
And with you saying if the town and us are in a conflict and thing, they could potentially distill that down to the 2 viewpoints. I don't know. It's a possibility, and I do see things like that happening. But otherwise, my friends get my viewpoint. But then if they're not friends with somebody in the town, then they don't.
Right.
This would be the idea of bringing it together. I don't know. It's an interesting idea.
I have some questions on how this would happen. I don't see this airport board hiring this person. I assume that the possibility would be for Moonshining to hire it, provided they were reimbursed for the cost of that. Is such a person exist in the airport district? Who would be in the community? I don't know how much that would be. Do you have any idea of that? Because I don't see us, this is me by myself, not the board. I don't see us hiring a person, and I don't see us paying for the whole thing. There'd have to be a lot of other groups, special districts, towns, et cetera, fire departments who would participate in this. I don't know whether they're there, but what do you think the costs of this thing would be on an annual basis? You have any idea?
I think that would be very difficult to describe without a clear description. But what I will say is, if you look at Moonshine's pages, just speaking from our paper, you'll see a lot of contributing writers that have been in the community for longer than I have. And so I do think that there's inherent experience in the district. I'm not sure that you were really asking that, but I think it deserves to be said that there are journalists here that would take this seriously and could do a very good job. I also want to mention that there are organizations and foundations across the nation that are recognizing this need, and they are putting money into it because it's needed, and they're seeing that. So I think you guys are looking at something that's already being done. I would like to see if there are other governmental agencies that are doing it and how that looks. My guess is that it's more on that grant helping fund it, supporting it, speaking out and saying that this is important, that kind of role, more than I'm overseeing or we're overseeing any kind of journalism. Because by its very nature, it needs to be separate.
Well, we have more work to do.
Well,
Don't we always?
Just the example of the fire thing that, just that we went to the fire thing, that would have been a very interesting thing to hit the information in a much broader sense. You guys found it interesting to hear the story, or that's an example.
Okay.
And so what are you picturing? Well,
I don't know. I mean, the practical application and how to make it happen is kind of vague, so I'm not clear on that. But I can say that, like, Nextdoor is sort of the new Yelp. Everybody gets on there and cries and bitches
ugly.
and cries and bitches. And if I see something on there, I go to Moonshine to get clarity because it's independent.
right.
So I don't know how this works with that, but I would hate to see more, oh my God, look at what the airport's doing, because we see that all over Nextdoor all day, every day.
I mean, is the vision that, if we say, yeah, this is a good idea, then this idea then gets taken to Tahoe City PUD or to the fire district or the town, and everybody puts money in a pot? Is that kind of the idea to start with, or?
Yeah, so the electeds that I spoke to at different agencies were all waiting to see what happened tonight here. And then based on that, they said they would decide if they were going to take this to their respective boards to do the same thing, to see, do you like this idea? When I drafted this, I kept it deliberately vague because I didn't want it to seem like I was making up how this was going to work for everybody. That I was trying to just paint a broad stroke kind of abstract, and that I thought that along with Mayumi or whomever was involved with this, that the member agencies would sort of define for themselves how they wanted the mechanics of this to work, but that I felt like the first step was the concept of this, and I appreciate the examples that you brought of similar things already happening. If that's taken to the other agencies and everybody says basically, yeah, I like the idea, but let's see if we can come up with something concrete before we make a final decision. And then maybe we do just put some people in a room and then come up with something that it's sort of like we could sort of model it after the CTA, the climate transfer, but I was hoping anyway, that this would be much, much simpler in terms of how it functioned or how it got going in there. But that same kind of concept where it was a self-governing sort of group that just, and I think the bottom line for it is that just the agencies just have to respect the concept of independent journalism.
Right.
And that's sometimes going to mean that something comes out that's not convenient, that might cause a line of public comment on something.
Yeah.
But that ultimately the opposite happens as well, whereas when the misinformation is circulating like wildfire, that there's actually a source people trust to get to the bottom of what is actually going on. So I feel like there's some checks and balances. I think it helps agencies meet the goal of transparency. If we're serious about the transparency, it's not just kill them with discovery. It's present information in a way that people can understand it and absorb it.
Clearly, nothing is simple.
No.
And
right.
We need to see if there's more people involved. Mayumi says there are, and I read the newspaper and contribute to the newspaper, that there are journalists out there. We just don't, we need to work on this a little bit.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Any public comment? Then let's move on to the next agenda.
What do we?
Yeah, could I just?
Giving direction to.
I don't know what we're doing.
What are you envisioning, or what are you envisioning? What now? I mean, I'm supportive of this idea.
Do you want me, and this of course would be up to the two of you, do you want me to meet with Mayumi and or Alex to to get something that's a little bit more focused.
I'd also like you to meet with other people and see if they're interested in contributing. We're not going to do this by ourselves.
No, absolutely not. No, I mean, I'm happy to do both of those things, or either of those things.
I think, yeah, I feel good about that. I can support.
Okay.
You have a
That's all right.
definite
That's all
commitment, sort of.
All right, thanks.
To flesh it out. And thank you.
Let's go to the next item, board committee assignments, ad hoc committee reports.
First up on here is Lauren. Any updates you want to add for the housing? Jeff, River Revitalization Committee?
There's some items up there that was discussed last month. Truly nothing significant to report.
Climate Transformation Alliance, nothing significant other than the extension of a professional service agreement that's copied in the board book to continue services with the Sierra Business Council to support CTA, both for us and the partners of the CTA through this year. Some of that funding should get refunded with a recent grant that was awarded to the CTA in Nevada County. That's all updates for now, unless Kat, you had something else. And act attendance next month, if there's any interest in the board. I think we have the topic on there. I don't have it in front of me right now.
I'd like to say that
Thanks.
I
I'm
actually,
going to say hangar revitalization, but I wasn't 100% sure.
I actually attended last month's ACT attendance. First time I've done it in a long, long time. It was worthwhile sitting on it.
Right.
I didn't have a LAFCO meeting.
So, that's right. We moved it from Valentine's Day. So if we have any volunteers, we'll make note of that. Otherwise, we'll work that out later for participation from the board members.
I might be able to, but I'm not, right now I can't. But that
I'm going to
might
say, yeah, you're not eligible. Sorry.
this one I can't be at?
Hangar revitalization.
Oh. I can't make it.
Yeah, thank you for offering.
I recuse.
I'm going to put it in my calendar to
Right.
try and make it. You know, and I guess I want to learn what you have in mind for how revitalized the hangars are going to get. You know, in terms of, I'm very excited, and, you know, the FAA push to clean them up, but in terms of the level of effort of how revitalized they get, I would like a sense of that before it's being presented to the general user. So I'm wondering if it's almost premature before you've had that conversation with us to where you're visioning that revitalization is.
Sure. Right now, I'm envisioning following what's been approved in the board budget for this year around hangar revitalization, which includes a couple components from fixing the broken hangars and upgrading hangars as budgeted between floors, lighting, and other components of them. Those are the primary areas of the improvements for hangars or the fixes for hangars. Other than that, it is the continuation of issuing the leases, which Jeff will talk about here in a moment this year, and the inspections that'll take place across all the hangars here over the coming months to ensure that we have an aeronautical use of hangars as authorized.
So when you get a hangar, I've seen some pictures. You're painting it. You're doing whatever. Are you epoxying the floors?
For the concrete floors, last year we epoxied 5 floors as a demonstration that we shared this past year with the board of one example of improving the hangars along with the light fixtures upgrades and electrical upgrades for the outlets.
Do we need to epoxy the floors?
Need to? I think we talked about this in the past, and
I don't know. I'm asking the question.
I believe it extends, I would say it extends the life of the concrete of the floor and the hangar itself and improves the conditions for our hangar tenants to utilize those. Makes it easier to clean up spills when they do take place. And I believe overall it is an improvement for the hangars that is very welcome on the part of the tenants.
And we've done these, and the hangars, the new tenants are happy with it?
You want to talk about that? Yeah.
Yeah. Two questions, Director Stevens. Industry standard, whether it's in commercial aviation, larger FBOs, Department of Defense, hangar floors are all epoxied. That's primarily to catch POLs, chemicals, things that airplanes sometimes leak. And so it preserves the flooring of the hangar, of the structure. I've heard from, of the 5 we've done, I've heard from one of the tenants, and we've heard from a number of tenants that have seen the pictures and some things out of the board book that have volunteered to say, hey, you know, look, I'll go next, I'll clean up my hangar, etc. I'd like to do it. If you've been in one of the epoxied hangars, one of the nice aspects is it's a lot brighter. So when you're working on your aircraft, etc., instead of having either a dark, dirty-ish gray, it's a more reflective surface, and it's smoother, and it doesn't capture petroleum oils and lubricants.
And that includes labeling the walls with appropriate signage saying no storage above a certain height and appropriate spill container apparatuses to capture oily rags and those kind of things appropriately to manage the hangars. So this year we're targeting between, I believe, 10 and 20 hangars is what we budgeted for, depending on the size of the hangars and what the prices come in at for improvements that would take place during the summer months when the weather conditions are favorable for epoxying and floors, for concrete floors only, not the asphalt floors.
Thank you.
That's all I had for that item.
I'm wondering at some point, we all got a tour of the hangars in the old, and I'm wondering if we can schedule a tour of some of these upgraded hangars.
Happy to do that individually as directors are available.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I'll give you a call.
Yep.
Thank you.
I'll move on to the next item, General Manager Report, unless there's other questions on the committees and ad hoc reports. On here, the next page on the graphic, I just wanted to highlight for folks that are looking at this that may not be aware of, these are the high-level areas that we've been working on that are part of our strategic plan for the next few years. I put green check marks next to those in these different 4 quadrants here as our 4 focus areas of things that are being achieved as directed. The ones with the black arrows are ones that we're currently working on right now as a priority and where we're spending some of our time talking about hangar revitalization program, a discussion with the board coming up potentially on recapitalizing aging infrastructure here at the airport. Also focusing on the purpose of airport funds, essentially policy 311 discussion. We had that this past January. I'm suggesting to have another conversation around that in the coming months as well. And of course, the Fly Quiet, Fly Safe, while we have launched that program now with board approval, there'll be an ongoing series of programmatics associated with that that Jeff will talk a little bit more during the AVCOM report section. Next is just a highlight, is just the concept of these 2 workshops that I'm suggesting in the next 2 months in March and April. One focused on infrastructure here at the airport, and the second one focused on our community giving policy, policy structure 311, and having a second conversation around that. These are elements of our budget that I think we have several strategic plan goals that support and are in these areas, and I think it warrants further discussion in a workshop format to really understand where the board is at on direction for staff to work on and focus in these areas. So there's no date suggested right now. I would suggest that this is in agreement with the board as an approach on these 2 areas in March and April, that we circulate a doodle poll after this meeting and try to schedule that time, whether it's on a board meeting day or on a different day that meets the director's availability. The balance of the report.
Yeah.
What? Happy to take questions. Yeah.
Just, in terms of, they're somewhat connected, and I like the idea of focusing on infrastructure, but I also, when that agenda is written, if it can also be allowed to be tapping into community investment, and when we get to community investment, some of that being infrastructure as well. So just so that agenda is written so that we don't get in trouble if we go off into a direction, because instead of them being siloed, there is intermeshing. And so that I would just ask that that agenda be a little broader.
Happy to take direction from the board or the board president and how he wants to draft that agenda. Happy to accommodate that.
Let's talk about it.
Okay.
Well, right now, let's talk about it. Do people agree with that? I mean,
understand what you said.
because the way that it's, in March, we're going to talk infrastructure.
Right.
In April, we're talking community giving.
Okay.
And to some extent, there's intermeshing there. And if the agenda's written that we only can talk about infrastructure, then if we go off task at all, then we can't talk about it. And what I,
Workshop, don't we have more latitude?
that's what I'm asking, is that the agenda is written that there's latitude.
My question was to Josh.
Yes to both of you. Yes. Yes, it's a workshop, so we normally do provide some additional latitude, but if the board's, there's consensus on Director Hetherington's point, we can make sure that that would explicitly include, community investment for the first workshop and then infrastructure for the second.
I think they should be the same.
The opposite.
No, just a little piece of each to allow some discussion of those secondary, the topic from the prior conversation or from the upcoming one.
Absolutely should be on the same day, because we're talking about how to cut the same dollar. I mean, I know they're separate bank accounts, but it's single budget on that side.
That's fine for me.
Okay.
Happy to do it on the same day or on separate months, days, as the board desires. I know our last conversation was many hours on one topic, and so we're talking about two additional topics here, essentially, that are can be complex. All right.
The question is, can we
Right.
get it done in a amount of time, putting them both together?
Not on a board meeting day, like a special workshop that's like 4 hours or something.
Right.
Yeah, totally. We should be able to grind through that.
I feel like what you're asking is not that we get down into the.
Into the
Yeah,
311.
but we just, as long as we have that on the agenda, then we don't have to stop ourselves and say we can't talk about
Exactly.
it. I mean, it's pretty simple. I think the presentation is probably exactly the same.
But
it needs to be on the same
the
day.
way-
Talk about it.
Needs
But
to
we
be on the same
all
day.
understand how the agendas are written.
Right.
Right? We get corralled. And I just want us to have that latitude to have that discussion.
So we originally we were talking about two separate
And I
meetings.
still think we may
Yes.
end up with two.
Why don't we just do the two separate meetings and say part one and part two, and the agenda is the same?
Or just
And then that way you can
One
just-
big meeting, so that Josh doesn't say, wait.
And I'm not sure he's even
And
going
I
to
want
be
to say,
there.
I mean, based on this conversation, we will make sure that the agenda is focused in a way, which, regardless of how the board moves forward, where I won't say that. You know what I mean? Like that's
all I
like
wanna
we will
know.
make sure that you have the flexibility you need based on this
Know
conversation.
that his
Yeah.
job is what his job is.
Yeah. Okay, done. Easy.
Okay, we'll circulate two different meeting dates and one meeting date as might work for the board, with a loose description for a variety of topics during the workshop. The other balance of the report I had, just an update, is some legislation that is ongoing between low lead transition in the state of California and also the inclusion intrastate of SAF, sustainable aviation fuel, in the low carbon fuel standard CARB program, potentially, that is being considered in a series of public workshops by the California Air Resource Board. And that is the updates I had. Unless
And
there's questions about that, I'll turn it over to Director of Aviation.
And just in terms of those type of things, this is an example of items that might be interesting to the general public. You know, this Senate bill and/or the CARB stuff that, you know, if this independent journalist, you know, that doesn't just going to affect us, it's going to affect other agencies as well. And to turn that out into English for the general public, this is an example. And in terms of the sustainability report and the Scope 1 and 2 program, I looked through that, it's great. And I talked to Rob about it. And the Scope 3, which is the aircraft emissions, is being worked on.
Yeah, so that was a 2022 report. We're currently reviewing the draft of the 2023 report. Now that we close out 2023, and it will include Scope 3 emissions in 2023. The 2023 report with N0 is outside the scope of that project, but it is in the scope of the work for 2023 with carbon accounting for the airport district. So I should have that at the latest by the next board meeting.
So so you've seen some data from that?
Yes.
Are you concerned about any trends?
No, it's just quantification of what's happening, I would say. Yep.
But we're not going up or down either way?
I would have to look at it a little bit more to you add the winter weather and seasonality of some of it. In the winter we had last year is one of the second largest winter we've had in history here in California. So there are some external factors that influence either the decrease in Class 3, Scope 3 emissions, which is the sale of fuel here during those heavy winter months, or is the increase in electricity use in the way of heating across the district here as well. So there's a lot of factors that go into these, but over time, they're worth comparing to a baseline to see if we're going up or down and why with regard to our carbon emissions.
Yeah, because First Environment did the first analysis on
Around
Scope 1, 2, and 3.
2016, I want to say, right?
It was after that.
Okay.
I think it was 20. But that would be an interesting comparative point when you do present the Scope 3, Scope 1, 2, and 3.
Right.
And, I would like that.
Can I ask Josh a question? I read something the other day, and I don't know if it's any one of these because I don't remember the number, but the California State Legislature has a bill in front of it soon to change the supermajority from 67% to 55%.
Yeah, that's actually on the ballot for November, and it'll change the bond threshold for infrastructure improvement, and there's a whole list of eligible projects, and I don't have it off the top of my head, but change that, Director Adet, exactly from 2/3 plus 1 to 55%.
And I think that's noteworthy to us as we think about where we're going to invest infrastructure, because this came to me from the two PUDs on my side are trying to do a rec center on the Firestone property, and the public opinion, 59% of people approve it, so they're not going to bring it to ballot until this other thing passes.
Reducing the approval level.
Correct. And I think that's really important for us as these people come, Parks and Rec, whatever, with their hand out, that they can go to the voters. And if they don't think they'll get it approved, why should we? You know what I mean? Same voters for us, giving away their dollars.
And if this is of interest to the board, I just talked to Rob, and I can add a little paragraph or two to his next GM report next month with a little bit more detail about that, if it'd be helpful.
I think so. I mean, it's pretty basic. If the voters approve it, we go to 55. And when I was at the fire district, we had to go to ballot to increase it's a fee-based thing, and it's a line item on your tax bill. And ours isn't. And that's, like the pool. You know what I mean? 55% of the voters need to approve it to increase the money for that. So good for us to think about.
All right. For the AVCOM report, there's a couple of areas I'll talk about the AVCOM, a little bit about hangar revitalization, and then at the back of the AVCOM with some sub-attachments, some information on TTCFs and some thank you letters. For this month's AVCOM report, we're repapering. To date, 99% of the tenants have opted into Fly Quiet, 97% have opted into Fly Safe, so that's really high, and that's of 146. It's higher than that now.
Wait, Jeff, I'm sorry. Can I
Yeah.
just confirm that I can be here for this because he's just reporting out on what happened?
Yes. Yeah. In terms of Fly Safe, the program's coming together really well. We had our first Fly Safe partnership seminar with FAA Wings this past Monday. We had 38 pilots attend in person and 54 online. So we had 92 pilots. I would say regional, because it wasn't just Truckee. There were also a fair number of pilots out of Reno, Carson, Minden, Stead. But 92 pilots attend the briefing, which is unheard of. And so the FAA was here. Larry Cheek, who's the unit program manager, he's the FAA safety team representative for the region, and he was super impressed and excited. And while we were here, had a number of local pilots saying, "Hey, I'm still trying to figure this out." And Larry had the computer and said, "Sit down," and he signed up a number of pilots right then and there. A really good brief from the National Weather Service, really good start. The next event, next month, we're going to have a Truckee CFI roundtable. So we'll have 5 to 6 local instructors talk about what the highest threat they see in our environment or regular common mistakes they see. Just a quick presentation from each of them, from their perspectives, and then open up to a Q&A session as well. In April, we have the AOPA Rusty Pilot Seminar. That'll be a Saturday morning event. It'll go from about 9 to 12. It's also an FAA Wings event, and we'll have an AOPA senior safety instructor out providing that presentation. We're also going to be doing a Cirrus mountain flying clinic. It'll be sometime in mid-July. It'll probably be in midweek as opposed to a weekend, because that's when we have more availability of the instructors we need. And really cool piece of that is this is a Cirrus designed program, and they've asked our Cirrus Training Center, which is Mountain Lion, to do the first one as a beta course. But it's a Cirrus training program for Cirrus International, so that'll be pretty cool.
Are we going to be bringing in a lot of people from out of the area to go through that, or is it based locally?
No, it'll be truncated to 15-ish to 20 pilots, probably.
Locally based.
Well, we'll open it up to everyone. The intent and first priority will be to KTRK Fly Safe pilots. So my assumption is it'll be primarily all of our pilots. So I think that is everything for the Fly Safe Wings piece. Hangar wait list. 2 hangars became available this month through some really good machination from Jill between moving folks around with the hangars from the snow damage and some folks changing their types of aircraft. We were able to do some consolidation to open up 2. For ops and comments, a lot of poor weather last month, so that reduced operations a little bit. Of note, there's an RV-12. That's a 2-seat trainer. So right now, 110 Hotel, if you've heard that, that's the training Cessna 172. There's now an additional aircraft available to Sierra Aero for flight instruction, so that is good. Household comments were about the same. If you look at the one household that was 72% of all comments, if you kind of do the math on that, our comments and households were about the same as last year, a little bit higher, but nothing significant. That is everything for the AVCOM reports. I think the first attachment after that is the hangar revitalization and inspection program. This is an update. There's nothing decisional. So just kind of telling you what we're doing. So we've been talking about this for about 7-8 months. And then we got the FAA land use inspection, and we knew that some of the stuff was going to be in there. So we were doing things that we've already been talking about for a long time. We've updated some of our PMCDs at the end of last year. We repapered everyone. I think everyone will be repapered. I think there'll be a handful of tenants that will, at the end of putting everyone through that sieve, that may find themselves without a hangar because they don't have an aircraft still registered, et cetera. But we'll give you an update on that next month. the way we're looking at, and we're going to do some test inspections in March with our new quote Go Civics. The name's gone away, and so the inspections and operations and maintenance module is called ASOX. So when one of our O&M techs goes through to do the inspection checklist will be on the iPad. They can do it right then and there, push it to the AVCOM side for property management, and then we can notify the tenant. So that's what we're experimenting, but to make it a digital event as opposed to paper. And the primary, again, nothing spectacular here. We're following FAA guidance. Primary items are impeding the movement of the aircraft. So the aircraft has to be able to move out of the hangar without anyone doing anything. So if there's an issue, if there's an emergency, there's a construction, our maintenance staff needs to be able to move the aircraft out without moving anything. Storage of household goods and making sure that the hangars comply with our minimum standards. So first test beta inspections will be next month, which is in 2 days, next week. So, and really, it's not so much to notify the front end, but to see how we can get the ASOX digital piece working and modify it to see what makes sense. So,
And we'll be sending a notification out to all tenants that this will be starting here in the coming weeks.
Because there's some planes in there that can't move.
I don't know the current state right now, but last time I went poking around, yes, sir, that is true.
I remember 3 years ago,
yes,
a plane with flat tires.
Yes, that's what we will be
Lots
addressing.
of dust on it.
Yep. I think there may be some tenants that may not be excited, but I think there will be a lot of other folks that as we, instead of paving more parking lot, let's remove the cars that are not moving and broken in the parking lot, see what we got. So,
Over to finance and accounting. Kelly.
Thanks. Mike stole mine. Oh, too late. Too late now. Okay, I just want to give you a few quick highlights from January 2024. Overall revenue of 1.32 million. We're 63,000 under budget. Expenses about $1,279,000 under budget to get us to a net income of 112. 215,000 over budget. At the end of my staff report, I added in a few different things. Talking about historical fuel sales, just wanted to point out that the 10-year average and looking at 2023 and where we finished and then looking back 10 years, average a day is 486,000 gallons. So it is trending with what we were budgeting for this year. Same with 100 low lead as well. So not radically out of the ballpark, but just trying to keep things consistent with our averages. And then a capital project update. So I added in our budgeted dollar amount. So this is what we went through and what we approved in the budget process. And then as each month goes by, I can give you the update on where we're at and also what we've spent on these items. So not a whole lot so far, just in 1 month. We got the Ford Lightning, that's the 63,000, replaced a F-150 gasser with an electric truck. And then we should see by the end of next month, if not sooner. Sarah's been working really hard in O&M and got 2 electric powered GPUs, so they should be here. I would say mid-month, next month. So, and working on quite a few other things, but so far we haven't spent a whole lot on that front yet. But it's in the works. And then, as we've been talking about all night, we've got the FAA land use inspection, and all of the things that we knew we wanted to do are already in place. We've got those new bank accounts, the 2 there, so now we have all 3. A week or so ago, I set up the new Cal class to the fund account or the savings account that we're going to use in addition to LAIF, in addition to our Wells Fargo accounts. It's just another place to put some funds. I'd like to use that for our reserve funds going forward. And in the actual financial reports, you'll notice there is now a department 500. So before we had 100 for O&M, 600 is admin, and 800 AVCOM. So I created a 500, and that's going to be for all the community benefit stuff. So it's very, very clear, very easy to see where those funds are, where they're going to, where they're coming from, and what they're spent on. So I actually just sent Jeff an email while we were talking about the FAA wings presentation, and if you have an invoice for that, let's stick it right in there. And that's where anything will go. That's community benefit related, obviously all the TTCF stuff, but lands management, all those other things that need to go in that bucket. And that's, I think, all I have for now. Any questions? Yes, sir.
How do you, with the code 500, how do you account for something that's a combination, like the tower, which has got a community benefit component and it's also got an airside component?
It's been budgeted historically as airport, but split between AVCOM and operations.
But would
That's an example of something we're eligible to use airport revenue on. So would not need to or have to spend tax revenue on that.
So
historically, that's what we've done.
Okay, so this is just
operating.
entirely about
Even though it
the money
benefits
that
the community,
not
right.
how we perceive it. So we're using 100% aviation money on that,
Yep.
even though we perceive it as in part a community benefit.
Well, obviously, we use tax dollars to subsidize everything.
Yeah, so
Well,
part of
that's
the
what I'm getting
justification of having a landing fee is for pavement maintenance and management and the tower. So part of the revenue we're collecting on the air side is directly related to the tower itself. So it is traditionally and makes sense as an airport revenue expenditure.
Right. So when you get the bill for the tower, that is not a 500 code.
No.
Okay. Thank you.
But it does benefit the community.
Exactly. That's
agree.
what I was getting at.
The entire airport benefits the community.
Any other questions? Thank you.
So item 11 on here, Rick, I don't know if you had any comments on that or?
Well, the only thing I added to the rolling agenda was next month, I'd like to have a vote on our LAFCO representative. There's lots of people there, and I have some recommendations to the board, and the ballot are just coming out now.
And we had that material, it just showed up, actually.
Right.
Yep. So we'll add that. We'll be scheduling with the board through Doodle Poll availability for workshop meetings coming up here. And we'll work with Director Diamond on a follow-up topic potentially around independent journalism.
And didn't we in prior want to have a meeting about the GM evaluation?
We're gonna have to do that again at 2:30.
No, like off-site, grind through it, get it done, because I don't want to drag it out.
As a
6
special
months.
meeting? So you want us to Doodle Poll a special meeting as well? Lauren can do that
Yeah.
also.
I mean, not, like, that's what I want to spend my day doing, but we need to get it done.
Yeah, I thought we were gonna do it today.
Back to closed session.
Yes, dear.
So on the conference piece, I just finished the last 2 days attending a webinar remote conference on carbon markets. And that was very educational. It was about 6 hours of European morning time here.
So the whole carbon thing that we just saw, it's like coverage at TRPA, like you can sell it. It's like not a real thing. It's like crypto. Right? I mean, I'm listening to it going, wait, you can sell it to someone in New Jersey? Like, and what, then they get a tax break? It's like a developer's credit.
I've seen somebody go out and buy carbon credits in Australia for a project someplace else.
Which does absolutely nothing for the actual carbon, right?
theory,
Because there's no giant sponge sucking it up somewhere.
in theory, they're not spending the carbon in, they're doing something to sequester carbon in Australia, and they took the credit for something that's polluting.
So I could share some of the resources from the course I just attended to maybe add a little more to this at a separate time. That might be helpful.
I mean, I'm all about getting the piles out of my neighborhood on my forest and the smoke that comes in October.
Yeah. Yeah, the course I attended was specifically around sustainable aviation fuel
Place.
was the
Sell
focus
anything.
of it.
Yeah, it kind of ratchets it down, and you can probably address it better, and like maybe you can send
Mm-hmm.
a couple paragraphs. Separate that 6 hours into 2 paragraphs, huh?
I can do that.
I can tell you about how it works in air quality. It's not on the agenda, so.
Right.
Thank you. But if you want to stick around, I can tell you how that's there.
As far as the last topic on here, direction to staff from today's meeting, the notes I have is to follow up with extending the agency partnership agreement with the pickleball court folks in the Park and Rec District. We'll do that. And I'll reach out to the board and try to set times for hangar tours for those who might like to take a walk around the hangars. There'll be some doodle polls, as we've discussed already, around future special meetings or workshops. And that's the highlights I have.
Any board member announcements? We've got a schedule. I move we adjourn.
Second that.
Any discussion, any public comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you.